Today I'm at South Hamilton Park in Novato, California, and we're going to talk about the U.S. economic crash that has already started and is already underway, and where things are going right now. Because economists actually have a very interesting prediction on this that I want to share with you guys that kind of backs up a lot of the things we've been talking about here on the channel. Like right now we have all of the warning signs flashing red. The layoffs are piling up. Inflation is eating into everybody's paycheck, and entire industries are bracing for impact. And the American economy isn't just slowing down, it is basically barreling towards an edge of a cliff right now. And if you think this is just another run-of-the-mill recession or downturn, think again, because economists are warning that the crash that's coming could be worse than anyone imagines. So when is this going to happen? Well, in my opinion, it's already happening right now. But as you'll find out once I get into economic predictions surrounding this, that we could be in for tough times to come for quite some time. If we rewind a little bit back to May and June of 2025, the BLS reported massive job gains. The economy's pumping along, right? Over 331,000 job gains. But just weeks later, they admitted that those jobs never existed. And according to Arizona State University, job growth in 2025 has slowed to just 0.45%. And back in 2021, it was 5.77%. And then, of course, the July jobs numbers came in at 73,000 jobs created, far below what the forecast said it was going to be. And then we had this major downward revision as well for the past year, where basically an extra million jobs that they said that we had were never created either. And for a lot of people, I think the job situation this year in 2025 has really been the wake-up call. Like, I know me and other channels on YouTube have been talking about this economic collapse and a major recession / depression for a long time now. But I think this job market is really hitting that point home for a lot of people, because now people are seeing that, hey, it's not just something that people are talking about on social media. This is happening to me. It's happening to my neighbors. People I know really are losing jobs right now, and it's almost impossible to get another one. And the problem is the whole world is starting to lose faith in the U.S. economy, which is not really a big surprise considering what we're doing over here. The U.S. dollar is the global reserve currency of the world, and it's not backed by gold anymore, but instead it is backed by trust, essentially. So the trust that the dollar is backed by is basically trust in the government's ability to repay debt. And we know that that trust is dwindling by the day right now. Also, the trust in the strength of the U.S. economy, which is also dwindling by the day. We have lost almost all the strength that we thought that we had. And then also, the biggest one, in my opinion, is global demand for the dollar. And the problem is we have the BRICS nations already working on an alternative global currency where they won't need the dollar anymore. These countries are already trading goods and services without using the dollar, and it's only a matter of time before they eliminate the use of the dollar altogether. This is ultimately what's likely going to lead to the downfall of America, as no country seemingly has ever held a national reserve currency for more than a century. And we have taken major advantage of our global reserve currency status, which I'm sure pretty much any other country would as well. But the problem is, we have such a debt and spending problem in this country, it is just completely off the charts. Like, for example, in 2024, the government collected $4.9 trillion in revenue, but it spent $6.75 trillion. That is a $1.83 trillion deficit. And what do they do to make up for that? They borrow more. That's the game plan. So you can see that we're on this completely unsustainable path that leads to financial ruin. That's where this all ends, unfortunately. And we are getting very close to spending $1 trillion a year just on the interest on the debt that we owe. So it is just this vicious cycle that we spend more than we make. Typical American household does the same. And then they have to borrow more to pay for that shortcoming, which is something that US households can only do for so long before they go bankrupt. And then eventually the interest payments become such a large part of the budget that we can no longer afford to operate properly as a country. And that is kind of bringing us to present day. A lot of people had hopes that the tariffs were going to start reversing some of this deficit, but now a lot of these tariffs might not even stick, as many of them have been ruled unconstitutional. So we'll have to see what happens with that. And here's the problem. As the interest on the debt continues to climb, creditors are going to demand higher rates. These are people who borrow money to the government. You might even be one of them. If you own US Treasuries or even a Treasury ETF in something like a Vanguard settlement fund, something like that, you are essentially borrowing money to the US government. And as this debt climbs, people who borrow money to the US government are going to require a higher interest payment because now the US government has become a higher credit risk. So the only real way that the United States can get out of this problem is if we seriously start spending significantly less than we bring in, which means giant cuts to the military, giant cuts to social and entitlement programs. And that's the only way it's going to happen. But nobody ever wants that to happen on their watch, right? Not the politicians or the people receiving benefits from the government. Everybody says, well, it's my turn, so I'm going to take that money. How dare you cut it now that I can finally get it, right? And we face a lot of problems domestically here just on a household basis. Like, for example, the tariffs are raising the cost of everyday American goods and services that people rely on and need to buy. People are facing stagnant wages that haven't kept up with the pace of inflation really since the 1970s, which is why everybody's broke these days. And then the food and housing costs have absolutely exploded and it's completely unaffordable for most people. That's why everyone's in so much debt. So back to what I was saying at the beginning, experts are predicting that the real economic crash might not come until 2027 or 2028 because of all these problems building in the background. Imagine if the debt continues to go up at the same pace that it's going up right now. Imagine if inflation and the cost of living continues to go up at the same pace it is right now while wages remain stagnant. Well, then you can easily see how in 2 or 3 more years from now, we are going to be probably at the start of the next Great Depression. But really, this is the start right now. And the sad thing is, it's not too late. You know, our leaders could turn this around by severely cutting spending, which is something that a lot of people thought the Trump administration was going to do, only come to find out that they just are increasing it rather than cutting it. So it's no wonder with all this going on that consumer sentiment in the US continues to slip. It actually went down an additional 5% for the September reading, according to the University of Michigan, although it is slightly above where it was at the low readings we had back in April of May this year. And when you look at what's really going on behind the scenes here, it's not really a big surprise that consumer sentiment is where it's at, because the sentiment among consumers with larger stock holdings remains steady, while those with smaller or no holdings at all reported weaker confidence. Wow, that's a shocker. People that don't have any wealth and any real assets are more worried about the future of the economy than people who don't have it. Well, of course that's going to be the case. You know, what do you expect when you have about 90% of all of the wealth that is held in the market held by just the top 10% of all households in the United States? How are you supposed to compete with that? How are you supposed to feel confident if you are in the 90% of people that doesn't have that? People also continue to express frustration over the persistence of high prices, with 44% spontaneously mentioning that high prices are eroding their personal finances, which is the highest reading in a year. And people are really getting the 1-2 punch right now, because not only do people have to pay for record high prices on everything, but they have to worry about how they're going to be able to pay for it if they lose their job, because we have already seen more jobs being lost in 2025 to date than we saw throughout all of 2024. So you can rest assured that 2025 is going to be a much worse year for the economy than last year was. And I remember talking about how bad things were last year, and a lot of other people were agreeing with me. And now, this year, it seems like even people who disagree with me now agree that things really are as bad as we've been talking about here. Also, something in the consumer sentiment survey is that inflation expectations went down slightly from 4.8% to 4.7%, which is still much higher than the official inflation numbers, but long-term expectations of inflation are continuing to go up, right now sitting at 3.7%. And one thing you notice is these inflation expectations are consistently higher than the official inflation numbers that the government continues to give us.